we would always say when the judges get it wrong, are they watching the same thing? Are they watching the same fight? And the answer is they're not. They're not watching the same thing that we're watching. They are cage side. They don't look at the monitor every single time. We always say that, are these judges watching the same thing? No, they're not. You're watching what they present in the monitor. And the judges don't look at the monitor every time. When Jorge Masvidal throws the flying knee to Ben Askren, the judges don't expect that. What if they were looking at cage side, they're looking cage side, and they don't see the angle that we're looking at? I mean, just an example, they are not really watching the same thing that we're watching. Because they're cage side. If you're cage side, you would watch the fight that's happening right in front of you, not the monitor. They would look at the monitor every now and then, but they would look at the cage side because they're close to it. I mean, have we not considered that they're not actually watching the same thing? Because not every one of us is cage side, unlike the judges. Have we also considered that they always say damage is the number one thing to judge? And we always say that damage is subjective. If that can knock any man out, but the guy that took the blow didn't get knocked out, would you consider that a big punch? Very tough question. And you might tell me yes, because the guy threw the punch that could knock anybody out. You see how subjective it is? And we always say that the number one thing to judge fights is damage. That is what it is. And we don't necessarily agree with it, but that is what we all say because that is what it's always been. And it's not necessarily that easy that a guy throws a punch and you can see, oh, the guy had a massive reaction. Right, in UFC 282 main event, those leg kicks were big. They were big shots that were giving Magomed Ankalaev a foot drop. Right, he bent the knee, right? He bent the knee whenever he got kicked in the leg. And when that happens, it's not necessarily that the judges look at that and go, oh, that's a big strike. Because you're also going to have to consider the mental damage and how close the fight was to end. And I do agree that that is a massive strike. But if you're a judge, you're looking at it from a different angle, you look at the kick and you go, oh, the guy that took the kick is still stoic. It didn't have an effect on him. His body had a reaction, but his mind is still fine. His mind is still operating on the same way that it was prior to the kick. I mean, do we not consider that? Do we also not consider that the fan reaction, right, when Jared Gordon throws those punches and it lands on Paddy Pimblett, everybody goes, ooh. But when Paddy starts landing on Jared Gordon's block, the arena goes crazy. He's losing the fight and all of a sudden, he starts throwing punches. That can influence a judge's opinion. And I am not talking to people that judge a fight to create some favor They judge a fight based on what the promoter wants to see. I'm not talking to those type of judges. I'm not talking about them. Because those guys, they do not belong in the arena. They judge fights based on what the promoter wants to see. I'm not gonna name names, because I'm not sure too. I'm not sure, I just don't have that insider information. But what I can tell you is that these judges, they're not necessarily infallible. We look at judges and we go, this guy should be incapable of making any mistakes. No, they're not. They're human beings. They do make mistakes too. They're not 100 out of 100 in the exam. They could be 98 out of 100, and that could totally give the win to the other guy. I mean, do we not consider that these guys, they're not infallible? We look at them and we go, these guys they're just infallible entities. No, they're not. They do make mistakes. And of course, I'm not promoting the idea of these judges making mistakes, because it does cost people's careers. It does stain people's records. I do believe Paddy Pimblett lost that fight. But at the same time, I don't think that we should necessarily be too harsh on the judges. We can burn them, we can grill them, right? It's okay to be harsh, but we should also consider where they're coming from. They're not watching the same thing. When you're watching a fight, don't tell me that you don't pull out your phone or go to the bathroom. You do. These guys never do that. When they're watching fights and the fight is on the ground and there's nothing happening, sometimes your mind can drift to other things. Like, just an example, like the gift that you're gonna give to your child. Like, those are just things, those are just examples that we don't consider why the judges are scoring the way that they are. And I'm not saying that they make mistakes and that's okay. What I am saying is that we shouldn't look at them and go, these guys are not able to make mistakes. They are able to make mistakes. We can't look at a guy, I mean, they are judges. When you judge a fight, it's always going to have a bias. If I judge a food that I just ate, it would influence my opinion if I'm hungry or not. If you're hungry, that food would taste a lot better. Or not. It does influence your opinion because you're judging it. When you judge things, there's always going to be bias. And I don't think that we should start looking at these judges and look at them and go, these guys are infallible. They are not. They are capable of making mistakes. I don't promote that. I don't like that they make mistakes. But I do think that we should recognize where they're coming from when they score the way that they do. Because we look at these judges and we go, these guys should have it perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. It's just not real. And when you have that idea that these judges are perfect all the time, that they don't have a stain on their shirt or something, you will be disappointed to see that they do get it wrong every now and then.